project is a year-long project. We started it in 2017 in November 18, and it's a year-long project. It will end on September 22nd. So how we run it? It is actually a project that runs the whole year, Bengal community, and anybody is welcome here. From every community, people gather here, come here, take the books, read the books, and submit the books on the next month. So in this project, we brought here books from Bengali literature, culture, in translated form in English. So readers of any age, any culture, any community, come here, get the books, read, and know about our culture, our literature, our Bengali way of life. So this is very important, and people appreciate it, people like it, because they are getting all the books to read. And there is another news, that is the readers who are aged between age 14 and 30, they get the chance to write reviews after reading the books. And BLRC will publish the best 10 writings, the review writings. And then the best 3 writers will get monetary gifts as well. So I think people love it, and people come here to join us and read the books, get the books. So I won't talk so much anymore, because we got here and Michael's, and I don't think there is any adjective that can describe her properly. So she is herself a name, and all her. So there is Audrey. I'll ask her to introduce Michael's, and before that, I humbly request you to come and take your seat. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So as you know, every month we have guest writers to come here. This month, our guest writer is Toronto's Poet Laureate, Anne Michaels. She's a novelist and a poet. She won dozens of different international awards and honors. Her books have been translated into 45 different languages. One of her most notable work is the collection of poetry, The Weight of Oranges. It was published in 1986 and won the Commonwealth Prize of the Americas. Another one of her most notable collection of poetry would be Miner's Pond, that was published in 1991. That book won the award, Canadian Authors Association Award. It was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award and finalist for the Trillium Award. Both of those collections of poetry are now released as one single volume as a collector's edition. Her first novel, The Fugitive Pieces, was one of her most beloved novels, of course, of its time, and it won several different awards as well, including the Orange Prize for Fiction, Guardian Fiction Prize, Trillium Book Award, and many more. This novel, of course, was also made into a feature film. For her second novel, The Winter Vault, she was longlisted for the IMPAC Award. She was a finalist for the Scotiabank Giller Award, Trillium Book Award, and many more. She also won many different awards, including the Guggenheim Fellowship. She was shortlisted twice for the Giller Award and longlisted twice for the IMPAC Award. And once again, I'd like to welcome Toronto's Poet Laureate, Anne Michaels. Thanks.
Hi, Anne. So I thank you for joining us today. I will be asking you a couple of questions to get to know more about you, and so the audience gets to know more about you. So we'll get right into it. So my first question for you would be, what inspired you to start writing and become passionate about it? Was there a moment or a feeling where you thought, I want to express these ideas and emotions that I have onto paper and share it with others?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. It is working. Okay. My work is all concerned with an idea that that I wrote in Fugitive Pieces, and that is the idea that there is nothing a man will not do to another, and nothing a man will not do for another. And I've explored this in many, many ways, looking at history, events in history, to try and understand certain moments when something occurs, when we have lots of documentation, photographs from events in the wars, terrible moments of horror, try to understand everything that has led up to that moment, everything that comes from that moment afterwards. Because all of history is this gradual instant. We think that something occurs suddenly, but everything has a precedent, everything has been caused by what comes before. And the more we are vigilant and aware of the things that are slowly eroding our rights, our humanity, our choices to do good, the more we can try and prevent that terrible, inexorable conclusion. So my works are concerned with history. They're also concerned with the power of goodness, kindness, love. We know that violence is powerful. We don't have to have that proven. We're completely convinced of the power of violence, but the power to do good, the smallest action to do good, that's tremendously powerful. And so I think we need to be reminded again and again that that small act is valuable. Because we think when we're faced with events that seem out of control, that we feel helpless, that there's nothing we can do, it's too big for us to address. In fact, even the smallest action is powerful and does something. So again and again, I'm trying to remind us that it doesn't have to be the huge gesture, which most of us don't even know where to start. It has to be only the smallest thing.
I love that idea because as as a student in like social justice, I also believe like the smallest act can make such a big difference. Like whether if it's an individual person and what you write, or in your actions as well. So I think that leads to the question, like, who do you write for? What kind of audience do you wish to connect with, and what kind of message do you wish to send with your lyrics?
I'm a writer who is very aware of wanting to reach the reader in a certain way. In the novels, you have 300 or 400 pages to hold the reader close to you. So we have the reader be a companion to you through that story and through that material. And because I'm writing about things that are difficult, that are painful often, and sometimes even joy is difficult to take in. It's not only the bad stuff, the horrific stuff. It's sometimes even intense happiness is difficult for us to embrace. But because I'm writing about things that are hard to look at, and that because it's human nature to just want to turn away from things that we don't want to see, we don't want to think about. I'm trying always in what I write to bring the reader and myself to the moment just before we turn away, so that we are able to face something in as deep a way as possible before we can't bear it. Because I think at that moment, it's a moment of thinking, being very aware intellectually, and very, very aware emotionally. So it's thought and it's feeling very intense at the same moment. And I think that that is the heart of morality, the moral action. Because when we're faced with doing the right thing, we think, I'll do the right thing, and when the time comes, I'll know what to do and I'll do the right thing. But in fact, I think we have to practice that. It's like a muscle and has to be exercised. We have to think about what the right thing is. We have to think about complicated situations so that we're always practicing thinking about what morality is, what is the moral action. So in my books, I'm thinking always, how can I bring the reader and myself to that moment where you have to make a decision, where you have to come to an understanding of something that is difficult. How do we find the courage in ourselves? So I look for ways to keep the reader close to me. So I'm very aware of the reader when I write. Also, when you write about hard things, difficult things, ugly things, you could write in a language that is ugly, that is brutal. But that to me seems a lie, because we cannot recreate that moment of horror, that moment of terror. We cannot actually recreate it. So, out of respect, because these are historical events that people really lived through, out of respect for that experience, I decide invites the reader to get very close to a situation. Because these things matter. These things are not inconsequential. How we think about history, how we feel about it, goes a long way to prevent things from happening again in the future.
In your first ever draft to deciding that you wanted to get it published?
Well, I was one of those fortunate people who knew very young, I was very, very young, I think even before I could read and write, that I wanted to be a writer. Because for me, when I was a child, I wanted to remember things. I wanted to hold them close. And I was very aware, as many immigrants feel, I was born here, but had a very much an understanding of what it meant to come from another country. And when I was very young, we moved houses, and that, in a tiniest way, was a window into that larger experience. Because how do you remember? How do you keep? How do you save? How do you move forward everything that you leave behind? So language is one of the ways we do that. We feel it in our bodies, we know, we remember, we sing our songs, we bring our recipes, there are many ways in which we bring our culture from one place to another. But language is a very, very powerful way in which we do that. So I remember very clearly as a child wanting to remember things, and that was when I started writing things down. So not only events, what happened, where you went, what you did, but what did the light look like coming into a room? What was that silence like? What did it feel like? What was the weather like? What was all those things that are intangible? How do we remember a feeling. So I was very young when I started to do that. But I think that for anyone who comes to a new place, and my novel, The Winter Vault, is very much about this. When you leave something behind, in that book, there were many, many examples of immigration, of migration, of being forced to move, of choosing to move. And in some cases where one section of The Winter Vault is about the building of the Aswan Dam, enormous dam that flooded Nubia with a lake the size of England, a huge reservoir. All that land, that entire nation was flooded, was lost. So not only are you leaving something behind that's still there, but in this case, you're leaving something behind that no longer exists on the earth. It is no longer, can never be seen. It's underwater. So it has completely disappeared. So how do you remember that? What is your responsibility to that? And when you come to a new country, how do we be where we are, raise our children, live our lives where we are, and how do we still honor everything that we have come from? So again and again in the work that I do, it is about these questions and how we carry the things that are most important to us.
Feeling and experience, especially when you speak a different language, coming from a different country, and immigrating to such as a place as Canada. When you're, the experiences that you've been through, whether it's war, trauma, how do you use language in a specific way, unique to you, to reflect that feeling, especially when you don't speak English, which is the majority language here?
That's a very good question. In Fugitive Pieces, the character in that book, when he comes to Canada, he does something interesting. He realizes that rather than write about the trauma that happened in another language, in his original language, whether in Polish or Greek, to write about it in his own language was so painful that he couldn't do it. So he thought, I will try to write about it in English to get a little distance from the events, from the language that those events happened in. So his choice was to say, I'm going to take this new language and try and tell that old story, that original story that is so hard for me to speak of. Other people might respond differently and say, I can only speak of those events in the language that they happened in. So I think with everyone, it could be different. For me, the challenge was to be able to be very specific about the things that I was talking about, the experiences that I was relating, and yet to write them in a certain way, difficult, that would be felt and understood by everybody, not only the people who belong to that culture, that language group, that ethnicity. So how can you speak of events in a way that will reach everyone?
Prejudice, and you're faced with negativity to that piece of work. And majority of the time it's because people are misunderstanding. So do you feel this responsibility to kind of address that, and how would you resolve the prejudice and negativity to your work?
So the question is, how do we make people understand, or?
Yeah.
I think there are a few ways to do that, and one is to, again, never forget the small things, because it's those small details that we share. How a mother sings to a child, how we sit at a table to eat together, how we understand when someone betrays us, or when someone does something for us even before we know we need it. Moments that are very intimate. And so I think the smallness of the gesture is sometimes a way to make a huge connection.
I was browsing some of your works, and I came across like a voice recording of you reciting 2 poems in the collection All We Saw. So one of them was To Write, and the other is May Love Sees You. And it is interesting how when I read poetry on a piece of paper, it's only my voice that I'm hearing, and compared to how you recite it, it's a whole world of a difference. So I'm wondering, like, when you are writing your poems, what is the importance of verbalizing your poems and saying it out loud as you're writing and editing them?
I always tell students to read their work aloud when they're writing, not to mutter it or, murmur it, whisper it quietly. And I know it's hard if you're in a house full of people to really recite what you're writing, but the moment that you speak something aloud is the moment that you can hear whether you're telling the truth, whether you're telling something the right way. And if it's not working, or if it's false somehow, you can hear it. Taken. Because the one closest to her cannot speak. Because he drew love into him from each body he entered. Because they are keeping her from him. Because the last time they met, he misunderstood her absolutely. Because a finger can hold a place in a book. Because a book rests in a lap. Because words are secrets passed one to another on a train, the same train where letters were crammed between slats to be found by strangers. Because they recognize each other over huge distances. Because a true word everywhere is samizdat. Because everything political is personal and not the other way around. Because forgiveness is not about the past but the future and needs another word. Because the true witness of your soul is sometimes one you've scorned. Because he painted the intimate objects of their life together, not from observation, but from memory. Though surrounded by the teacups, the flowers, the garden, he retreated to his small room to paint, each object transformed by love. Because words are mirrors that set fire to paper. Because every day she risked her life for him. Because he remembered this too late. Because he was mistaken. Because he was certain. Because certainty and doubt consume each other like dogs in a parable. Because of a Sunday morning in London. Because of a cemetery in Wales. Because of a mountain and a river. Because he imagined himself an orphan. Because an infant cannot carry herself. Because to be heard, we do not need a pencil, and we do not even need a tongue, and we do not even need a body. Because the one who holds the pen, even if it's too dark to see the page, and even if the ink is his own blood, is free. Because an action can never be erased by a word. Because we set down what we cannot bear to remember. Because we cannot take back what we sang. Because the dead can read. Night is fallen. Somewhere night is falling.
দূরে কোথাও রাত্রি নামছে।
Somewhere a man stands outside a church, too bitter to enter, yet bound by doubt to that place.
দূরে কোথাও চার্চের বাইরে দাঁড়িয়ে একজন ঢোকার ব্যাপারে বিরক্ত, কিন্তু সন্দেহমুক্ত হতে না পেরে ঢুকতে বাধ্য।
Somewhere a woman fills a glass with clear water and flowers drink their last moments in the last light of the fields.
দূরে কোথাও এক নারী পরিষ্কার জলে গ্লাস ভরছে এবং ফুলগুলো শেষ মুহূর্ত থেকে পান করছে ক্ষেতের শেষ আলোতে।
Somewhere a child stands next to a wall in the desert.
দূরে কোথাও একটি শিশু মরুভূমিতে দেয়ালে হেলান দিয়ে দাঁড়িয়ে।
Somewhere there is a house with a portrait of Beethoven and a child who wonders if it is a picture of her grandfather.
দূরে কোথাও এক বাড়িতে দাঁড়িয়ে আছে বিটোভনের ছবি, আর সেই ছবির দিকে তাকিয়ে এক শিশু ভাবছে ওটা তার দাদুর ছবি কিনা।
Somewhere there is a boy learning to wait.
দূরে কোথাও এক কিশোর অপেক্ষা করার তালিম নেয়।
Somewhere, for the sake of his children, a man writes what he is seeing.
দূরে কোথাও একজন তার সন্তানদের জন্য লিখে চলেছে সে যা যা দেখেছে সব।
Somewhere, for the sake of his children, a man will not write what he is seeing.
দূরে কোথাও একজন তার সন্তানদের জন্য লিখবে না সে যা যা দেখেছে সব।
Somewhere there is a son with the memory of a father's touch on his back, giving him courage.
দূরে কোথাও এক পুত্র স্মরণ করে পিঠের উপরে বাবার হাতের প্রত্যয়ী স্পর্শ।
Somewhere a mother gives courage to thousands of mourners at her son's funeral.
দূরে কোথাও একজন মা তার পুত্রের শেষকৃত্যে ভরসা যোগান সহস্র দুঃখী জনকে।
Somewhere a man measures the dimensions of the prison precisely.
দূরে কোথাও কারাকক্ষের পরিধি নিখুঁতভাবে মাপজোক করে একজন।
Somewhere a woman plants a garden in front of the prison.
দূরে কোথাও কারাগারের সামনে ফুল বাগান করে এক নারী।
Somewhere thousands stand where once the square was empty.
দূরে কোথাও সহস্র মানুষ এমন এক জায়গায় দাঁড়িয়ে যেখানে এক সময় বিরাম ছিল।
Somewhere a cave is lit by a torch.
দূরে কোথাও একটি গুহাতে মশাল জ্বলে ওঠে।
Somewhere there is a man who walks beside us without a hat in the rain.
দূরে কোথাও একজন মানুষ আমাদের পাশ দিয়ে হেঁটে যায় বৃষ্টির মধ্যে টুপি ছাড়া।
Somewhere a man reads a letter and folds it carefully into his heart.
দূরে কোথাও একজন চিঠি পড়ে এবং পড়া শেষে সযত্নে সেটি ভাঁজ করে রাখে বুকের মধ্যে।
Somewhere a man weeps for what he has found.
দূরে কোথাও একজন কেঁদে ফেরে সে যা যা দেখেছে তার জন্য।
Somewhere between Paris and London, a man peels an orange on the train.
দূরে কোথাও লন্ডন ও প্যারিসের মধ্যখানে একজন কমলা লেবুর খোসা ছড়ায়।
Somewhere a man waits in a train station with the taste of coffee on his palate.
দূরে কোথাও এক ট্রেন স্টেশনে একজন মুখে কফির স্বাদ নিয়ে অপেক্ষা করে।
Somewhere a man waits in a city for a woman who waits for him.
দূরে কোথাও এক শহরে এক পুরুষ অপেক্ষা করে সেই নারীর যে তার জন্য অপেক্ষারত
Somewhere a man holds out his hand before we know we need it.
দূরে কোথাও একজন মানুষ সাহায্যের হাত বাড়িয়ে দেয় সাহায্যের প্রয়োজন অন্যের আছে কিনা তা বোঝার আগেই
Somewhere there is a room lit only by a painting as night falls.
দূরে কোথাও যখন রাত্রি নামে একটি কক্ষকে আলোকিত করে কেবল একটি চিত্রকর্ম
Somewhere there's a man who is not afraid to live in a woman's hope.
দূরে কোথাও এক পুরুষ আছে যে কিনা একজন নারীর আশ্বাসে বাঁচতে ভয় পায় না
Somewhere there's a man who has not forgotten anything and has written it down.
দূরে কোথাও একজন আছে যে আসলে কোনো কিছুই ভুলে যায়নি এবং সব কিছুই লিখে রেখেছে
Somewhere there is someone so close to you, there are no details.
দূরে কোথাও তোমার ভীষণ একজন আছে যার কোনো বিবরণ নেই
Somewhere a woman's gift has not been deepened but corrupted by loss.
দূরে কোথাও একজন নারীর দান অনুভূত না হলেও কলুষিত হয়েছে
Somewhere there is a man who has given away everything and stands in the rain grateful.
দূরে কোথাও একজন আছে যে তার সব কিছু বিলিয়ে কৃতজ্ঞ চিত্তে বৃষ্টির মধ্যে দাঁড়িয়ে
Somewhere the dead are leaving a sign.
দূরে কোথাও মৃত মানুষেরা চিহ্ন রেখে যায়
Somewhere there is a man who meets his late mother in Lisbon.
দূরে কোথাও একজন তার প্রয়াত মাকে লিসবনে দেখতে পায়
Somewhere a man makes soup for the village.
দূরে কোথাও একজন তার গ্রামবাসীদের জন্য স্যুপ বানায়
Not necessarily a literary criticism about the writing style, but more because of certain topics you chose to write about just because those people think that they're controversial. And how do you deal with those criticisms?
I haven't come across that yet. I haven't. There hasn't been controversy about that, and I think it's actually. It's interesting because some of the most direct ideas are actually explosive. You know, if you apply them in a certain way. Even the idea of how we can, starve evil or defeat evil by small action. I mean, that could be a very controversial thought because we're used to hammering, violence with violence, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But in terms of direct reference to events, no, I haven't come across that kind of controversy. And told me about what you were doing, the BLRC creating the conferences that you do every year, etc. I was very, very excited because we have so many languages in the city, and in every language, a rich literature that we can't, as English-speaking Canadians, we have no way of reaching, understanding, learning from, enjoying. So to make a bridge is fantastic. And when you think of that happening throughout the city, it just opens up an enormous possibility. And so you are doing, you're leading the way You're absolutely leading the way. You should be incredibly proud of this initiative to do this. And everywhere I go as a Poet Laureate, I say, you know, this is incredible work that you're doing. And so I think also it can mend things and heal things in other ways as well, because as always, the second generation, the generation born here, who is embracing English because this is where we are, but wanting to or needing to, and certainly the parents, the first generation, wanting to pass on all that culture that you come from. So how do we do both? How do we make our children completely fluent and successful here, and also keep what's important from where we come from? I think that what you're doing goes very far to this, especially if we can bring young people into the conversation, and maybe use Twitter, use internet, use other ways to do it, and to have young people such as yourself, wonderful, wonderful questions you've asked me, thank you, to start that process in the younger generation. And we've talked about this before, that the young people have the English. They are fluent. They know it. So if they could begin to translate, then you have something remarkable happening, because you're passing down at the same time as you are carrying forward. So, you know, as Poet Laureate, we've talked about, you know, how can I assist or help to make some of these things happen. And we talked about an event coming up in the fall that was going to be for young people in Scarborough, and young poets. And so to have maybe young poets come and read in English, or read in Bangalore, or begin translating in English, would be incredible. And your publications, where you have a bilingual edition, it's expensive to do it. And maybe we can find sponsors to help bring those books out. But that's incredible. I know of one publisher already who would be interested, I think, in pursuing this, to bring out small volumes. They can't do very large ones because it's expensive, but to bring out, you know, I don't know, a book with an anthology, and then have the translations, English and Bangla.
So thank you very much, Anne, and all who are present here for coming here and attending our event. Thanks a lot.